Hello, hello. It's Juho Pesonen from University of Eastern Finland here, and in this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on branding in tourism. Branding is a huge issue in tourism marketing. It's one of the biggest and most important things destinations should be doing when it comes to marketing. And in this presentation, we're going to take a closer and deeper look into what is branding in tourism. You might want to start this by closing your eyes and thinking of any destination, any tourism destination that comes to your mind. Just think about it for a while. What would be the place where you would love to be the most at this moment? For many, you will be thinking about New York, Paris, or maybe even the Maldives, Australia. For some of you, it might be even Finland, and for example, Koli that we see here in the picture in this slide. And this is what the branding is all about. We want to be there when people start thinking about their next destination where they want to travel to. However, typically there are some limitations to how we do tourism. For example, it's very rare that we can pick any destination or that we even want to pick any destination in the world. Typically, we base our decisions on our own motivations or the interaction between the travel party, for example, the family that we will be traveling with. Some might be looking for a suitable family destination, others for a golf destination, some others culture destination, and so on and so on. And tourism brands and destination brands are trying to find their own target segments and their own lifestyles where they want to be among the first destinations that the people wanting that certain kind of holiday would think about. And why some destinations come to your mind and others don't? And this is the key question in branding. This is what we want to achieve with branding, that your destination is among those few destinations that people consider and even start thinking about and looking for information when they think about their next holiday or a trip. And how we make these destinations famous and to come to the minds of the people, it's all about stories. And most of you thought about New York and Paris, and very few thought, for example, about Savonlinna, which is a small city destination in eastern Finland. And that is because of the sum of stories that are being told about all these fantastic destinations and places. We want our stories to be heard and we want our stories to be famous. And this is very powerful for tourism. If we think, for example, film-induced tourism, locations of Game of Thrones where they filmed the series are becoming really popular or have become really popular among certain type of tourists. That's because of the stories the series is telling about those places. I think the first thing we have to look at is actually what is branding, what we are talking about when we are talking about branding. I would like to define the branding as work that a person or an organization does to increase awareness or change the image of stakeholders by meeting the value promise every single day. And in tourism especially, this value promise is a really interesting thing because we have to think about who makes the value promise, who promises what the destination represents, what kind of feelings, what kind of attributes, how the trust is built, who defines that. Typically, it's a DMO that is promoting the destination in various markets. But who makes sure that the destination meets the value promise every single day? That's the businesses and other tourism stakeholders in the region. So this creates a really interesting interaction regarding tourism destination and tourism branding, that the destination marketing organizations and businesses have to collaborate together in order to create a brand and meet the value promise that they are giving the marketplace every single day. So in this presentation, we're going to have 5 different topics that we will be focusing on. First of all is that a brand is different. The second is all about how the brand is the sum of its stories. Third one about how brands excuse me, are made to be shared. Fourth topic is responsibility in branding, especially in tourism branding in today's marketplace. And the final is that the brand has to be measurable and that we have to have the tools and resources to make sure that we measure our branding. Well, let's take a look at the what it means that a brand is different. This is the the core of branding. Why we do branding is because we want to be different from all the rest. We want that our brand represents something else for the tourist, for the consumer, for any other stakeholder that no one else does. And we are talking about destinations in the sea of sameness, meaning that there are many similar kind of destinations that are providing similar kind of attributes. And we are trying to make a brand for the destination in order to be different from all the other places that have the same attributes. Because it's very rare in tourism to be able to develop and build new attributes for a brand. This is one of the examples where it has been successful. Many of you might recognize this picture. It's from a holiday village called Kakslautanen in Finnish Lapland. And this picture with those glass igloos is actually one of the most viewed pictures in Finnish tourism history. It's globally recognized, and it started a huge trend. Kakslautanen managed to differentiate themselves from all the rest with these snow igloos. They were basically the first company that really broke through with this kind of accommodation. But what happened after that was that everybody started doing it. It was so popular, so successful, that now we have glass igloos in Rovaniemi and Lapland and in many different destinations and in many different places. And what this means is that even though Kakslautanen is not that differentiated anymore, Lapland is. So when all of these igloos came together, they form a really strong and powerful destination image for the whole Lapland. So now Lapland is also known for these igloos, which is good for the whole destination. And of course, you can also see the Northern Lights in this picture, which is by far the most important attraction in Finnish and also in Norwegian and Swedish Lapland. That's the main reason why people come there. And this means that the brand is very strongly built on the attributes of the destination, what is there. But with destination branding, we should be focusing more and more on the benefits that the attributes in the destination create. And this is one of the key takeaways for marketing, that it's easy to tell tourists what there is in the destination and do branding based on that. But we should be focusing more on what all of these things mean for tourists, what they enable the tourists to experience, what kind of feelings and emotions they create. And one of my favorite topics in tourism destination branding is, of course, my home area, the Lakeland, Finland. So Visit Finland has divided Finland into 4 parts, and Lakeland, Finland is a huge part of Finnish tourism development at this moment. It's a huge geographical area that is among 13 different regions in Finland, so it's quite huge. And one of the biggest questions we have been talking about is how to create this Lakeland brand. What is Lakeland even the right brand that Eastern Finland should be promoting? Because we have many different city brands, regional brands, local brands in tourism. And the question is, what is the brand hierarchy that we are trying to build, with what resources and for which markets? And this is not an easy question. We have been doing this for decades already. And where everything starts actually is that every destination has their own DNA, their destination identity, what we really are. And those should be used to base the differentiation for each brand. And if we look at this picture, for example, it has 6 pictures from different parts of Lakeland, Finland. And as we can see, they are actually all very similar. And this is from southwest corner to the northeast corner. The core attributes of the brand is the same in everywhere in Lakeland, Finland. And this is something that we hardly ever really recognize as the basis of our branding. It's not just about, of course, the attributes, but also what those attributes do to tourists. And this is something that the Lakeland should be more focused and discussing more about. And the key idea here is that what is the right amount of collaboration that needs to be done in order to make an internationally recognized tourism brand? Is Lakeland Finland now an internationally recognized tourism brand? Not so much. But for example, one part of Lakeland, Lake Saimaa, is starting to be a brand in some markets. But let's say, for example, we have one municipality in Kuopio, and they are doing international marketing in tourism. They are promoting their businesses. They are promoting whatever there is to do in Kuopio region for a very particular audience in Germany. And this one municipality and their DMO can reach up to 100,000 people every year. This means that 100,000 people is hearing about the brand Kuopio. But to really be memorable, you have to be there again and again and again and again. Meaning it's not enough just to reach 100,000 people once, but you have to reach them up to 20 times based on Google research to really make an impact. And let's say that all of the 13 regions in Lakeland, Finland would put their resources together, and all the businesses would put their marketing in a way that they all mention Lakeland, Finland whenever they are doing anything for international markets. That would result in millions and millions of views and impressions and engagement with the Lakeland, Finland brand. And that would enable it to make an impression on the minds of the tourists. And this is all about what is the right amount of collaboration we have to do. And I personally think that we should be doing as much collaboration as possible and create this Lakeland Finland brand that is very much based on what Visit Finland is recommending and suggesting in doing. But at this moment, we don't have a DMO that would actually cover the whole Lakeland area and be the international representative of this region. So that was all about why brands need to be different. If you cannot be different, you have to combine the resources to ensure that you have enough to make an impression in the tourist's mind and have a very strong and different value promise that actually all the Eastern Finland municipalities have very similar. And how do we make this impression is actually understanding that a brand is the sum of stories that is told about it. If we look at New York, for example, how many stories there have been told and are being told about New York? How about the regions here in Eastern Finland? Joensuu, Kuopio, Savonlinna, even Saimaa region, or the Lakeland region. Who are telling stories and how much stories and what kind of stories are being told about this destination? This comes again down to collaboration. If we all are telling stories just about our own places in Eastern Finland, it will be really difficult for the international tourist to understand that all these stories are connected to certain lifestyle or value promise. So we want to tell as much stories as possible about our destination. People don't actually remember facts that well, but if we can tell a good story, that's what they really remember. And in this case, it's important to look at the impact of the story. We want our stories that are being told about the destination to be as impactful as possible. And there are many factors that are affecting how impactful this is. For example, the source of the story. Is the story told by a business, by a destination marketing organization, or for example, by a tourist who has visited the region, or a travel blogger, or a guidebook? All of these sources have different impacts on them, or affect the impact of the story differently. People want to hear the stories of their peers, people that they can relate to. And it's also about the listener who hears that story. Are they in the right target group? Do they represent the lifestyle that the destination represents? Can they relate themselves to the story? Of course, emotions. We want our stories to be able to create emotions and not just the stories that are being told in marketing and social media, but also the experience. What kind of experience, emotions experience in the destination creates. And again, the quality of the stories, very important for marketing purposes. But on the other hand, we are also witnessing that people don't want to hear perfect stories anymore. They want to hear real stories that might be a little bit more rugged than traditional marketing content, that everything is perfect and fine and beautiful and so on. So it's not about raising the destination higher and using all these superlatives about how great the destination is, but it's about creating content that people can relate to. And of course, repetition. It's not enough that people just hear one story about the destination, but it has to be there all the time, every day, as many times as possible, especially if they love the brand. That's how you create a story, and stories that then create the brand. And branding is important because it's so difficult to identify exactly the right moment when the tourist has to be reached with the right message in order to influence their travel decision making. The research Google has been doing shows that planning a holiday is a really complex project that goes back and forth from one stage to another. up to 7,000 digital travel touch points over 4 months. It's huge. But what brand is doing is making sure that your destination is there when people start thinking about traveling. It's the top of mind awareness that people automatically include your destination brand among the things that they will be looking for. and a great example of telling stories is on, from my perspective, what Copenhagen is doing with the End of Tourism as We Know It campaign. And they are changing the whole way they are telling the stories about the destination with this. It's not about mass tourism anymore. It's about individuals doing things that contribute to the destination. Tourism is changing, and the destination storytelling is also very much changing because of this. And all of this storytelling also results in destinations being like media companies. They have to have departments that make sure that and actors and stakeholders that really tell these stories. So I think these are the main things about storytelling and how the tourism brand is actually the sum of stories that are being told by all the different stakeholders in tourism, and not just in tourism, but also in place marketing in general. All right. The third thing about branding is that a brand is made to be shared. Very often we think that brand is ours and no one else can touch it. But in tourism especially, it's really difficult for anybody to really enforce that the brand is used correctly by different stakeholders. If a brand is a collection of stories, it also means that as stories, also a brand is meant to be shared. People understand stories, from way back in the Stone Ages. We were able to accumulate knowledge by telling stories because our brains are really good at sharing stories and storing stories. So that also goes for a brand. And I think what Eindhoven, for example, is doing is a fantastic example of how we can make a brand and elements of the brand in a way that people want to share them. For example, this sandwich is, for those who are familiar with the Eindhoven brand, immediately recognizable that this is something that comes from Eindhoven because it has those 3 lightning bolts of the destination. And when Eindhoven was doing their new brand, they included all the stakeholders, and they wanted the stakeholders from the local people to be proud of their destination brand. In tourism, everything has to be built from bottom to the top. We cannot have top tourism officials, destination marketers coming to the region and just telling the businesses that this is the brand you have to go with right now. It's all about how tourism businesses and tourism stakeholders in the destination want to be branded, want to be known in the world. And it's imperative that the businesses in the region want to build a brand. If the businesses are not in the brand building business, it's very difficult for a brand to be successful. And it's also about that what I was saying in the last part, that we don't want to be perfect in marketing anymore. We don't want to create the perfect marketing message, but we want different stakeholders to tell our story. But all this takes a lot of time. These are some news items from Helsingin Sanomat, a big Finnish newspaper, about tourism in Eastern Finland from 1932 and 72 and 85, that what we are talking about now is actually not anything new. These issues have been existing for decades, and we have still not been able to find the correct solution to brand and create an attractive destination, globally attractive destination in Eastern Finland. And this also shows that it's always a marathon to build a brand. It takes time. You cannot bounce from one idea to another all the time, but you have to create all the possibilities for the brand to succeed and make sure that those possibilities are utilized as well as possible. And a brand has to reach a certain level for people to start sharing it. Brand has to mean something. If brand doesn't mean anything, people don't want to share it. People want to share something that they think of as important, something that they want everybody else to know that they think of as important. If a brand is not important for the tourist, it's no use. And this is the key of creating a brand that people want to share. It's a collaborative initiative that has to include all the stakeholders from bottom to the top, and everything has to be done in collaboration. Brand is also responsible. Responsibility is becoming a big part in destination branding. Visit Copenhagen was a good example of this. Another one is Nepal and Mount Everest. This is a picture of tourists reaching the top of the mountain. Is this responsible branding anymore? Just in 2019, 11 people died climbing the mountain. Marketers have actually become really good at marketing the destinations, and tourism industry has become really good at marketing tourism as a leisure activity. Tourism is still growing, and this is creating challenges for destinations. And many destinations are now moving into more responsible and sustainable branding and dialogue with their stakeholders. Now, this is also a really good thing in many ways. Now we have to tell stories. We have to be more than just a tourism destination. And it's a really interesting process how destinations will be transforming from pure leisure into something more. For example, local destination here, Visit Karelia, has a really well thought mission on, as far as I can tell, that for the Karelia region, tourism exists because it enables the region to preserve the heritage and lifestyle and nature of the destination for future generations to also enjoy. And this is the direct impact of how tourism can be a good, positive, responsible phenomenon for development. Amsterdam is one of the famous examples of over-tourism phenomenon, how it's full of people flying there from different parts of the world, and especially Europe. For quite some time, Amsterdam branded themselves as a bachelor destination, or was branded as a bachelor destination. And this means that branding has effects on how the destination develops and is being built. If you brand yourself to be the #1 destination for bachelor parties, it's very likely that you are going to have a lot of bachelor parties and people celebrating and making things quite uncomfortable for the local people. So when we are making branding decisions, we need to keep in mind that is this responsible not just for the tourists, but also for the local people. And it also emphasizes the importance of taking the local people in the process when thinking about tourism destination branding and developing branding. But on the other hand, this is also a good example that you have to focus on a very particular segment of customers and be really good at that segment. You cannot brand yourself as providing something for everybody, but brand has to mean something and it has to be appealing for a certain market segment. But this development in responsibilities is really much welcomed in the destination marketing and branding literature. Well, the final thing is that a brand has to be measurable. How many destinations or business really measure the success of their branding campaigns or the branding that everybody, all the stakeholders in tourism are doing? Because if you are doing something, if you are doing branding, you have to be able to say, are you going in the right direction with the branding? Are we achieving the results we are looking for? And how are our branding actions and content and storytelling and experience and all of these affecting the success of the brand? You cannot manage something that you cannot measure. Luckily, there are many good measurable measures to measure how well we are doing in branding. Typically, these require customer research. For example, surveys trying to find out, as in this case, what's the familiarity, how many people are in the consideration stage, what's the likelihood of visit of these market segments. And this is research that Visit Finland, for example, is doing. They are interested in how their branding is affecting their main markets. Is Finland a successful tourism brand, a destination brand? We are among one of the slowest growing tourism destinations in Europe, basically during the past 10 years. So this show that maybe Finland has not done a huge breakthrough in international markets when it comes to destination branding, but at least the growth has been well controlled. In Finland, there's very little over-tourism issues. But again, it's what we want to achieve with branding. This looks at how overnights have grown in different destinations. And overnight as a measurement of success for tourism is becoming almost obsolete. We are more interested in the effects that these overnights and tourism activities create for the destination, for the people living there, and for the tourists themselves. Meaning that we want tourists to enjoy their trip. We want them to experience a lot of different things, use money that that stays in the region instead of going to international markets. We want the tourism to bring well-being to the destination. And this is also affecting how we measure the success of branding. Branding is all about what kind of infrastructure we develop in the destination, where the destination should be investing in and developing towards in order to fulfill the brand promise better. If you don't even measure how your branding actions are really affecting your target group and changing their behavior, can you even say that you are doing branding? I think that if you want to be a brand, you really have to measure the success of your branding. Customer experience, top of mind awareness, how how the local stakeholders perceive the brand and the branding actions. For example, any big company should be measuring how employees are satisfied with the brand that the company is presenting to the marketplace. We have fantastic digital tools now to track branding measurements and measure the success of branding, for example, following online conversations with big data, following social media discussions, reviews, and all of these that all the destinations need to utilize in order to understand their branding activities better. So that's it for branding. We discussed 5 different topics in this presentation. First, how the brands we are building needs to be clearly different from all the rest that is in the marketplace. There needs to be different emotions, different attributes. And if a brand is similar to something else, for example, the neighboring municipality, it might be good to collaborate and create a stronger brand together. A brand is the sum of its stories, meaning that all the stakeholders are telling stories about a destination, about a tourism brand. And the brand is how much those stories are being told, by whom, and the quality, and all of these that affect the impact of the stories on the brand. Brands are definitely made to be shared, such as stories are made to be shared. We cannot be jealous that someone else is utilizing our destination brand. It's all good. Whenever they are talking about you, making sure that your brand is visible in the marketplace, it's good. A brand is responsible, and especially in tourism, this is becoming a big trend that all the brands have to take some kind of stance towards responsible development. And finally, a brand is measurable. If we are going to do branding, we have to be able to show that we can measure the effects of the branding actions we do. Thanks for listening, and hope you learned something about tourism branding.